folks. Today we're on the road with Mike Lashbrook. Mike has been painting and carving decoys for 51 years, and his family's history with decoy making extends back almost 100 years. Thanks for visiting with us today.
You bet, Tim.
Our viewers are really anxious to meet you and get to know you. But for those folks that aren't familiar with Lashbrook Decoys, tell us a little bit about the history of how your dad started and how the decoys that you and your family make have developed over the years.
My dad had an uncle by the name of Buck Meyer. He was a lath and plaster guy. He worked for my grandpa a lot. My grandpa was a general contractor in Pekin, Illinois. My grandpa did not hunt a lot. But Uncle Buck Meyer was a market hunter. But anyway, Uncle Buck Meyer would bring Dad back a green-winged teal every time he went. And so that gave Dad the bug. And then he started hunting with his uncle. And this guy was kind of a reprobate. He was a high-stakes gambler. He was not a good provider or husband to his wife or daughter. A real rounder. But anyway, probably a typical duck hunter for those days.
Yeah.
And so anyway, they'd bring them ducks back, and then they would hang what when I was a kid used to be the Thrifty drugstore. I don't know what it was when my dad was a kid, but it was right catty corner from the Tazewell County Courthouse. Would be on the northeast side of the courthouse, right across the street, and they would hang these ducks on the alley, on the back wall, on the north wall of this building, and then people would come from town, and you buy whatever you want. And so Uncle Buck would bring this green wing over to Dad, and in about 1920, Dad would have been about 7 years old, and he started going to these uncle. And of course he could stand in the blind, and then in the mid-20s, my grandma would allow him to carry a gun. Grandma seemed to be the
regulator.
Oh yeah, yeah, and she seemed to call the shots of the family. So anyway, by the mid-20s he could carry a gun, but up until that time he would watch. And of course they all had a butcher string, and you tie your call to the lapel of your coat, put it in the top pocket. And then Dad would call, and I've seen him do this many times. I thought it was kind of, because people, it's like this nowadays, but then like this, and then you muffle the call. When the ducks are in close, then your coat's open, you got wool shirts on, and you muffle the call in your clothing. So you don't flare ducks, because too much calling, you know what that does.
Sure.
And guys think they have to call. There are places in the United States where they hunt ducks. There is no tradition of duck calling at all. They just, they shot lots and lots of ducks. When my brother's hunting South Texas, by the time the ducks get down there, they're pretty spooky. And all this crazy calling, all these crazy runs on calls, you don't do that.
Yeah.
And in the same neighborhood where they lived, 1 to 2 blocks east of the Douglas School, you had Louis Maurer. They call him Rudolph in the Illinois book, but Louis Maurer, and he probably died around 1940. You had Henry Taubert. He was a commercial hunter, and he hunted on the islands. Would be on the Illinois River west of Pekin. Turkey Island would be one of them. Then you had Fred Mott Sr. and Fred Mott Jr. They all lived within about a block of Dad. Now, Fred Mott Jr. was too young, but Fred Sr., and then when Dad would walk to school, Louis Maurer from Switzerland, he had farm ground, and I don't think he was ever married. He had a big walrus mustache, and he would sit on his porch and make duck decoys. And if you guys have seen these decoys, they're kind of clubby, but they'll work. Pintails, cans, blue bills, I've seen blue wings. And he made a real blocky, squarish decoy.
Okay.
But anyway, a lot of ducks then. I've talked to guys that hunted back then, turn of the century hunters. You feed. Dad would get from Montgomery Ward. Dad never did like Sears and Roebuck, but Montgomery Ward, he would get English callers, and they would use to lure ducks in. Of course, you could feed and do other things.
Now, for folks that might not know, an English caller is
a hybrid mallard.
Hybrid mallard hen.
Well, they had the drakes too.
Okay, so they'd use both?
Yeah, and they had both, and then at the last day of the season, they would shoot their decoys. And then, of course, you didn't have refrigeration in those days. My grandma and grandpa had a bungalow-style house.
Now, let's talk about shooting their decoys. So they had these live English collars
yeah.
that they had a tether.
Yeah,
or
you had a
something on
tether, and they were commercially purchased tethers. Just clip on, looked like a big snap swivel, a giant snap swivel that you
Right.
use for fishing.
but the reason that they chewed them is they didn't want to have to feed them all year.
No, no, and they were food, and this is, depression by this time.
Right, right.
And so this is
so
food.
nothing was going to waste.
So nothing goes to waste.
Right.
And Dad liked to shoot diver ducks, especially bluebills, especially. I know one day down at Spring Lake, he had a real good day. That just by himself, just passed shooting about 60 bluebills. Dad has killed 7 redheads in 7 consecutive shots with a Model 12. No plugs in them days, and he let this bunch of redheads light in. He whistled, let them get up, bang, 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 7 shots, and just rolled them. But my dad was an exceptional shot.
Now, did he ever work as a pusher on the river?
No,
He
no,
just,
no.
He hunted
Just hunted
by
for
himself and with
yeah,
friends?
Yeah, yeah. Of course, when he met my mom in the late 30s, then they hunted a lot together. My mom's dad, he had farmed about a section for a fellow by the name of Bud McCary out of Havana, and they had duck pens. And I've talked to guys in Pekin that shot in those duck pens. And of course, my grandpa would bring shelled corn out, maybe 2 or 3 boards high on a wagon, back a team up with horses, and then dump that shelled corn inside a pen, and then the ducks would come off of Clear Lake in Chautauqua, and you just stand there on the edge of the pen and shoot. My uncle was a little boy then, and he can remember piles. And I'm not talking about 2 or 3. I'm talking about piles of ducks and geese in the front yard of the farmhouse. But this Mr. Bill Scarcliffe, he was a sportsman from Pekin. He was a TV repairman in the 50s when I was a kid. And we were talking about duck hunting one day, and he mentioned about taking the train out of Pekin, going down to Topeka, and being picked up by a guy named Burgett. Well, Olin Burgett, that was my grandpa. So it made a nice connection. He told me about pen shooting down there. But I don't want to get too far from my dad. But anyway, so we got these guys that live in the same neighborhood. We got Louis Maurer, we got Fred Mott Sr., and we got Henry Taubert. But Louis Maurer, and then also Emil Brosmer. Emil Brosmer was a butcher. He had a butcher shop in Pekin. And Emil Brosmer and Louis Maurer are the ones that really inspired my dad. My dad would watch Louis Maurer again when he was about 6 years old. And again, he's already getting the ducks from his uncle, Buck Meyer. He's already got the bug. And so then Emil Brosmer actually taught him how to make decoys, and Dad worked off a Brosmer pattern for a few years. In 1931 and 33, Dad started using his own, well, actually Wilcoxon and Elliston.
Now, so was he chopping his blocks out? Or?
Yeah, some of them he chopped out. And then, of course, see, Grandpa was a carpenter, so he had a shop,
So
he had a mill.
access.
Oh yeah, a bandsaw, that kind of stuff. But some of them were actually, his early decoys were cut out with a coping saw, and then chopped out rough, and then draw knife, and then filed. My brothers have a lot of the original files and original draw knife Dad used.
So, did he start off making solid body decoys, or his always were hollow? Yeah. And do you know what he was using, white pine or cedar, or what was he?
Yeah, white pine. Because you could get, just for building a house, you could get what we would call pattern grade. I mean, totally clear, not a knot in it. You just go to the lumber yard and you tell them, I want clear white pine. And of course, Grandpa had the materials there.
Right there.
And so it was no big deal. In 1931, Dad graduated from Pekin High School, and he made 18 green-winged teal off of a Richard Wilcoxon pattern. The guy lived next door to Grandma and Grandpa. They're on Royal Avenue in Pekin. His name was Morris Huff, and he was an older guy. Split his hair down the middle. You know how they combed it. Smoked cigars, and again, that's how I remember him in the 50s when I was a little boy. 52, 53, 54. And anyway, he had a lot of wooden decoys, and he had this Richard Wilcoxon green wing. And so that is where the green wing pattern that we used for decades came from. Now,
so we're up to about the 31 Wilcoxon style decoys.
yeah, 18 of those when he was 18.
Okay, and so how did he progress from there?
Okay, well, he's already made quite a few decoys, but this is where he began to have I would call it a more stylish Illinois River decoy. He got away from the Brosmer style, which was flat and pretty much flat on the bottom. Mm-hmm. A very workable decoy. Emil Brosmer did some really nice comb work. But then he went to Bob Elliston and the Barnharts in the 33. And then 35 and 37 he made more decoys, and 39 he made widgeons, and that was done in Arizona. Him and Mom lived out there in 39 for a while.
Now this is going to be
52, 53, and then he quit.
Okay.
He stopped temporarily.
Now, now were all of these decoys that he made he's using, or is he selling some, swapping some?
Both.
Okay.
When he got too many, and you know, I mean, you guys got homemade decoys. You put them in a boat.
Right.
I mean, you got some weight.
That's right.
And you don't take a lot with you. If you put 50 or 60 out, that's a lot.
You bet.
But when we hunted with plastics, we'd have 200, 300, 400 decoys when we were boys in the 60s. So anyway, when he got done with them, when they start and maybe need some work, then he would sell them.
Okay.
But he never made them commercially, as per se. You would order a dozen cans, a dozen bluebells, a dozen redheads.
Okay. So about 53, he quit?
About 53 he stopped, because there was 3 of us boys by then. Canvasback shooting on the Illinois was shot. He sold those. And then 62, my brother wants to hunt. And so instead of buying, you know, Dad's back in the old thought process, you know, let's make them. They're expensive to buy, just like when he was a kid. So it started. And then Gabe, we were talking about the teal season. Gabe's got these decoys. It stirs Dad's interest. Gabe talks about the collectors. You know, people are collecting by then. So we made blue-winged teal for that special teal season. And I never had art lessons in school. Never had painting lessons from nobody except painting on my grandpa's house or my dad's house. You know, 4-inch brushes, white paint, gray paint, what have you. But anyway, we had an urge to. I was about 13 at the time. My brother Don was about 11. Raymond was 8. Raymond's a little too little.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, we each get our teal decoys and our brushes and our oil-based paints, and we start. And it was okay, because we did better than, you know, a lot of the, not that we were terrific artists, but we were trying. We were trying real hard for Dad.
Right.
So we just wanted to do it, you know, it just wasn't black, white, and black. We tried to, you know, do as much as we could, put his wings and all this other baloney, which you don't need to hunt with. And then, I did not get to go teal hunting. I had a job, I had to work, I had to save money for college.
Wow, what a great afternoon we had with Mike Lashbrook. Obviously, you can't get 51 years worth of experience in a 10-minute segment. So join us in the shop, Mike Lashbrook, Part 2. From the Decoy Shed, I'm Tim Spate. Be sure you check out our sponsors, Hook and Hunt TV and Select Screen Printing.